apply it in areas of our lives throughout this next week. Thank you, Lord. Just be with our service, upcoming service as well. Pray these things in Christ Jesus' name.
When we take a look at the Psalms of Ascent, like many other passages in Scripture, they're progressive.
Bill, we're talking about Psalms, and you would think one doesn't build on the other, and most of the time you would be right. But when you talk about the Psalms of Ascent, they're more like Psalm 1, first the negatives, then the positives. There's a natural progression. The Beatitudes have a natural progression. The Psalms of Ascent have a natural progression. And from what I understand, what I read, I actually, never really walked up to the temple in 1200 BC. So I didn't exactly, can't tell you from experience, Matt. From what I read, they actually sang them in a progressive order. They would start with 120 and they would sing through them in the order that they're written down. But as you go through, you can see there is this natural progression. When we take a look at the first one, Psalm 120, the first of the Psalm of Ascent, it begins with this whole moving in the right direction. Ben, it begins with he's in Kedar, and he comes to himself and he says, I don't want to be here anymore. There is a decision. The whole thing begins like it would begin. I'm deciding to go on a journey. And then it goes from Psalm 120 to the next progression. Okay, Psalm 121, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. Brother, here he goes. He says, I'm going to go on a journey, and on this journey, guess what he sees? It's going to be a rough journey. It's a big old mountain. It's a long way. Justin, this is not going to be easy, but I've made up my mind to go on it because on the top of this hill is what I need. This growing in relationship, this increasing this relationship with God is what I need, and that's where I'm going. But you know what I see right now? I've decided to go on the journey, and what I see so far is the problems. I see this is going to be rough. I look unto the mountain. I look unto the hills. I can't get my eyes past the problems. Problem. But Doug, I'm not quitting because I know I've decided, my decision is on top of those problems, on all of that hardship, that's what I need. And so there's this picture. I see the problems, but I've decided to go, and so there's a little progression. Then we get to Psalm 122. Psalm 122, we had a transition. This goes from seeing to believing. It's learning to look through the eyes of faith. Now this morning we're going to take a look at Psalm 123 and 124. Psalm 123 has in this well, here, look at Psalm 123, verse 1. Unto thee I lift up mine eyes, O thou that dwellest in the heavens. Now, but Bill, contrast that with Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills. You know what's missing between the two? By the time he gets to Psalm 123, his focus is so much on what he needs on that relationship that he's not seeing the hill. The problem here is not, I don't see all the problems. I just see the goal. I just see where I need to go. The problems have diminished in their size. Now, it's still the same hill. It didn't get any easier to climb. The desert is still the desert. But Brother Wayne, his focus is such on the prize that that's what he's looking at, that he's not concentrating on the problems. And that's going to be important. We'll see that in a few minutes. And then in Psalm 124 just goes through this whole picture of taking a look at the things that God has done. Now, that's where we're going to go. And Justin, I got to tell you, I'm very excited about this section. We've called the Psalms a book on prayer, God's prayer book, the biblical prayer book. And I believe that it is. But in this little section of the Psalms of Ascent, these two Psalms, more than any other, help us understand prayer. Now, one of the things about Psalms as a prayer book is, Matt, this is not an instruction book. This is not the way like you and I are taught. This is more like the way a kindergartner is taught. You know how you teach a kindergartner? It's a picture book. They go through, there's not words, there's not this is what you do. And Psalms as a prayer book is really kind of like a photo album. But it doesn't tell us what to do. What we get to do is we get to see it being done. Now, after we see it being done, we can understand and do it. And that's how these two Psalms are as they look at prayer. And it's very important because if we're going to go on this, Ben, if we're going on this journey where what we want to do is experience more of a relationship with God. That's the decision we made. That's what we want. I want to experience more tomorrow in my relationship with God than I do today. I'm heading towards the temple. I'm going towards this place. I want to commune with him more. But Bill, if I'm going to do that, well, I have to make a decision to start on that way. And I have to understand that through the problems, he's going to help me. And I have to learn to look and live by the eyes of faith, not the eyes of the natural man. But for sure, this journey is going to need some conversation back and forth. And we are not going to grow in that experience with the Lord unless we grow in prayer. And we can see those two things in these two Psalms. Psalm 123, we're going to look at it here in a minute. It's basically going to call us to ask what we need. Psalm 123 is going to ask us to affirm what is done. Now, I'm going to make this picture and say, I believe these two things, asking what we need and affirming what is done, Brother Hank, these two things are the train tracks that the train of prayer is going to run on. You need both of them. Hopefully by the time we get to the end, you'll see one without the other is a disaster. But these two things are what helps us move along on this journey. Begin Psalm 123, and you'll see as we go through it, it's a very short psalm, but this is written from a believer who is under attack. This is a believer who is tired. This is one who's getting ridiculed and torn down, and it is in this frame that he is reaching out and asking. Now, that should be us. Furthermore, we are going to suffer persecution if we live righteously. So this is a picture of what our journey should be like, and it's how we should respond. Psalm 123, Unto thee I lift up mine eyes, O thou that dwellest in the heavens. Behold, as the eyes of a servant look unto the hand of their masters, and as the eyes of a maiden unto the hands of her mistress, so our eyes wait upon the Lord our God, until that he hath mercy upon us. Have mercy upon us, O Lord, have mercy upon us, for we are exceedingly filled with contempt. You said, Brother Hank, you said, wait, what are you talking about? He's tired and he's under attack. He just told you. He's filled with contempt. On every hand, people are mocking him and making fun of him, and his life just doesn't make sense to them. He walks through this earth, and it's just anger and contempt and ridicule, and he does not fit in, Brother Maddox. There's no comfort and peace here. And so he's looking to the place where there is comfort and peace. Verse 4, our soul is exceedingly filled with scorning of those that are at ease. They fit in. This is like their place. And there's scorning and attacking and tearing me down. And with the contempt of the proud. No, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time there, but Ben, I just can't miss that. You know who's doing the attacking? You know who's throwing the stones? Those who are proud. And I'm going to tell you, that is such a natural inclination, Brother Doug. It is so easy to do. You know, we can wrap it up in I'm fighting for righteousness. I'm fighting for right. And we can just I can throw stones at Brother Maddox. I can just sit right here. You know what? Last time he spoke, he shouldn't have done it this way. He should have done it that way. There should have been more of a care and a compassion in that time. I can even be right in what I said. But I will always be wrong in throwing that stone. It tells you right there it comes out of pride. Like the Bible even tells us that's going to happen. I mean, just picture Christian growth. Matt, you understand? You're growing to the same place I am. Okay, you don't have to say how old you are, but I'm a whole lot older. You know what that means? That means you and I should not be in similar places. You know what? You got a little daughter. She should be way down here. Ben, you know, he's older, so he should be stuck in the middle somewhere. I know he doesn't look it, but you know, Grecian formula does well. No, I'm just kidding. We have a plan of what we're supposed to do. And it tells you start that conversation without pride. Brother, brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, you which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness. So, Brother Maddox, you can be wrong. You know what it says? It says, I should talk to you about you being wrong. And something good happens from that. I talk to you about you being wrong, and either I say, oh, no, you're right, I see. Or you say, oh, no, you're right, I see. There's Christian growth there. But that's not usually how it happens. The proud throw stones. We throw stones at each other in here. We throw stones at a church around the corner. We throw stones at a church in Detroit. We just like to throw stones. And you know why we throw stones? Because I'm better than them. Does that not reek of pride? Just a little warning right there. We shouldn't be so proud. But Tammy, pride falls into marriages. It falls into children. It falls into best friends for life. Pride is divisive and destructive and sin. Anyway, so in this psalm, because that's just way too much time, I think there are 4 practical things that help us grow in this area of prayer. First is very simple. 2 are going to be negative, 2 are going to be positive. It's nice when things balance out that way. And that's the first one is this: just don't stare at the mountains. You see what's happened in the growth from 121 to 123? You don't stare at the mountains. Don't concentrate on the difficulties of the journey ahead. Doug, this psalm begins by looking and fixing our mind and fixing our heart on God. I am fixing mine eyes upon you, the one that dwells in heaven. My sight is not on the mountains right now. My sight is on you. Let me tell you, this is huge when it comes to prayer. Matt, we tend to turn prayer into a shopping list, a Christmas list. Focusing on God and not the problems will protect us from doing that. Most Christian prayer is a kind of prayer that's nothing other than worrying on your knees for 5 minutes. It's the opposite of not worrying and trusting in God and giving it to God and all the other phrases we use to justify it. Brother Bill, it's just worrying on your knees. We begin in a posture of prayer. We say, "Dear God," at the beginning. We say, "Amen" at the end. But for 5 minutes, we just sit there and worry about all the things we're focused on. Prayer begins with looking at Him. Now, this psalm is full of petition. And I said one of the points is that we need to ask what we need. But before we ask what we need, we got to focus on who we're talking to. Staring at our problems. Rob, staring at our problems is only going to make us feel worse. If we don't focus on the one who's in control and the one who loves us and the one who has power, Brother Bill, if we don't see that, all running through our problems does is make us depressed. And then it makes us doubt, and then here the psalmist shows us that we don't stare at the mountains, but we begin by viewing Him and who He is and where He is. And the second is, Second is, like unto the first, we need to just get our eyes off self. All the way back in the late 300s, prayer has been described this way. Prayer has been described as a narrow path. There's no train tracks in the 300s. So, he did it differently. As a narrow path with a ditch on each side. Ben, the ditch on this side is pride. The ditch on this side is despair. The answer to both of those ditches is to keep your eyes focused on God. When we begin to look at self, we're either going to bring prayer into the place or we're going to bring despair into the place. Now, here you go. If we ascend in prayer, when we focus on God, if we take pride in that ascension, this was written in the late 300s, so they talk different. If we take pride in that ascension in our prayer, well, it's going to do what pride does. Pride always makes us tumble down. Justin, pride in prayer doesn't have any ascension. The proud will be brought low. The way to avoid pride is always the same. How do we not get pride? We look unto Him. Because, Bill, I've learned this. If I want to feel good about myself, I always compare myself to someone who's struggling more than me. It's easy to do. If they're not struggling more than me, I make them struggle more than me. It's my view. It makes me feel good about myself. Now I can tell them what they should do. The Bible has a great answer for that. It tells people what should do. All you got to do is focus there. But, Justin, something different happens when I focus on Him. I never feel better than Him. I never feel in control. I never feel like he should do it my way. I often start prayer with, I got to get these things done. It usually doesn't go very far before I'm yours, Lord, and your God, and help me to see and understand, and I just become broken. Prayer does change things, Brother Bill. It always changes me. I'm going to tell you, true prayer, Doug, you've been around long enough. You know, I really don't like corporate prayer very much. No, I believe it's biblical, and I believe it's necessary, but I struggle there. Because prayer is so humbling. Prayer reveals my challenges and my problems in my heart, and I don't want that, furthermore, I don't want that tied to a clock. When he starts working, I just want to keep going, and that's a little unfair to 200 people who, you know, like want to go home and eat the pot roast, and I still want to sit right there and say, well, you opened that up, I just want to keep looking at it. Something happens in real prayer. It has a humbling effect. The answer to pride is to look to him. Today we live in a time of surveys and assessments and sessions. So you know what all those things do? All right, I'm going to give you, okay, they have a place. Let me do this. You're not going to fix any school just because you're a principal, okay? Illustration. You're not going to make any school grow closer to the Lord through sessions and questionnaires and, okay, they all have a place. But you know how you're going to make that school better? By getting them to look to Jesus, not to spend more time looking at themselves. Okay, no church gets better through all of those things. That doesn't fix the answer. The answer is look to Jesus. No relationship, no marriage, no. Matt, the answer is look at him. But it's so easy for us to just concentrate and look at self over and over and over and over again. There's an old story about a gardener who plants tulips. Brother Maddox, every week, you know he can't help himself, so you know what he does every weekend? He digs up the tulips to see if they're growing. And then he plants them back, and he digs them up, and he plants them back, and he digs them up, and he plants them back. Nothing's going to grow under that scrutiny. We are not going to grow constantly assessing and focusing in. You know, Justin, at some point, we need to look above. We need to look up. Our focus needs to be here. And you know what? Who leads us on that path? Remember, it's two ruts, one narrow path. When you focus him, you know, it's easy just to keep walking towards the path. When we start looking down here, we don't know when it takes a zig or a zag, and we can end up in the pride or in the despair. And when it comes to this despair, I mean, this was written 395, I think. He says this is pretty good for 395. Really, really tough. If you find yourself unpleasant, if you make yourself unhappy, take your eyes off self. Bill, if you're stuck in despair and depression, quit looking at it. Well, that's just not so easy. No, look at God. But that doesn't change my situation. It changes who's in control. It changes the viewpoint. It changes everything. Don't stare at the mountains. Take your eyes off yourself. Two positives. Take a position of the servant, verse 2. Behold, as the eyes of the servant look unto the hand of their master, as the eyes of the maiden unto the hands of the mistress. Here we have a picture. This is how we approach him. I ask him as a servant would go and ask the master. Now, as a servant to the master, Justin, I need him to direct me. You know what I get to do in life? As the servant to the master, I get to do what he wants me to. As the servant to the master, I need him to provide for me. You know who has everything, who has control, who has all the provisions? The master. I need him to direct me. I need him to provide for me. I need him to protect me. He says, as the servant to the master is how you go to him. Now, the problem, we get this backwards. We're the slave. He's God. But we're tempted to say, as the eyes of the master to the slave, go we to him. And that ends up in something like this. God, I need to direct you, so I need you to do this and this and this. And why isn't this done already? And who would talk to him that way? We would not go that arrogantly. Oh, no, we flower it up with nice, like Christian words. But the truth is, we're sitting right here telling him what to do. Especially if we talk about the name it and claim it generation. or second generation of the generation. Lord, let me tell you, this is what you need to do, and this is what my life needs to be. And this, where is the servant? Where is the submission? Where is the dependence? Where is the you're God and I'm not? Prayer will never be our manipulation of God. I'm going to tell you that's kind of sometimes what we think. Matt, we turn it into this picture. If I just had the words, if I just could spin it the right way, it's like one of your girls wanting to get the perfect Christmas gift. So you know what they do? They'll use guilt, or they'll use charm, or they'll use whatever tool is in the bag to get mom or dad to say yes. Oh, don't act all tough like it's not going to happen. Just let me tell you something. If it doesn't happen from you, it's going to happen. But look, this is human life. This is what we do. But Maddox, the problem is this is what you and I did at 7 too. Okay, you want the BB gun? You found a way. You want the teacher to like you? Guess what we did? What do I need to do to get the teacher to like me? You find a way to make it happen. Well, here's the problem. You grow up, and that's what you've done. Guess what you continue to do? Guess what you think you can continue to do? Okay, but that's not how he works with us. There's no emotional blackmail that gets God to do it my way. It is not the... We are not the kid getting our Christmas gift. We are communing with an almighty, all-knowing God who cares more about our growth than our comfort. Oh, I don't like that. Well, isn't that how you thought you were being a good parent? Don't stare at the mountains. Get your eyes off of self. Adopt a posture of a servant. And 4, fix your eyes on heaven. Fix your eyes on the throne. Fix your eyes, verse 2, on the hand. There's 2 things right here he tells us to look at. Don't look at self. 2 things we are to look at. Unto thee lift I mine hands, O thou that dwellest in the heavens. You know, he lives above us. He lives in the heavens. He lives in this place of power, this place of creation, this place of the throne. In verse 2, it talks about his hands. Now, Justin, when you start thinking about heaven, you're going to think about his power and his authority. But Jeremy, I hear, that first thing, don't look at the mountains. That sounds all good. That's good Sunday school stuff. But that's really hard to do. If you knew my problems, you wouldn't say that so flippantly. You can say that to me. But Wayne, you can say that. If you knew my problems, your life is just so easy. Well, be careful, you're almost throwing a stone. Just be careful. See, sometimes I'm not a good Christian. I catch that thing and throw it right back. Well, I'm not going to tell you your problems aren't big. I'm going to tell you, look to a bigger God. Okay. Here you go. Oh, Jade, what floor is Quarles on? Okay, 34. Here you go. Let me give you this picture. Jade works in 101 East Kennedy, downtown Tampa. Big old tall white building, nice pretty building. Out in front of that building has, I guess you call it a sculpture. It's metal. What do you call it, metal? I'm still calling it a sculpture. It's a sculpture. Big old metal sculpture. It's about 30 foot tall. Okay? Every day you can see somebody taking a picture in front of that sculpture. In fact, I've been asked at least 20 times, will you take this picture for me? Man, I always hate doing that. Because here you got some little 5'2" woman standing in front of a 30-foot sculpture that wants that whole 30-foot sculpture and wants all the picture of her in there. And this is really hard to do. Because if you get that whole 30-foot sculpture, she's about this big. And Justin, that's how it is when we look at our problems. When we look at our problems, compared to us and what we can accomplish, they look so big, and we look so small. Well, Jade works in that building. Sometimes now she just works at home. I don't think she works anymore. She's getting lazy. But she works on the 34th floor. So you go up the elevator, 34 floors. You walk over to that window. You look out and look at that sculpture from 34 floors up. You know what it looks like, Brother Hank? It don't look so big. And here's what I want you to understand. When you and I look from earth at our problems, they look really big. But you tell me how you think they look from the throne of heaven. They're not so big from that point of view. Remember I said these Psalms are in progression? Well, you know what the Psalm 122 said? It said we need to learn to look at life from the mirror of heaven. It's not so big then. Learn to look at life from the eyes of faith. Our problems aren't so impossible when we're looking at them from that viewpoint. When we fix our eyes on the throne of God, on the power of God, problems are smaller. And then in verse 2, it references the hands of God. Well, I don't know. Matt, I don't know about you, but you can't mention the hands of God without me thinking he was wounded. They were pierced. You can't mention the hand of God without me thinking of the tremendous, amazing love God has for you and me. Now let me tell you what I believe. I believe when we see his power and we see his love, it provides a freedom for us to ask anything. Now it's not a shopping list. You see, now I'm considering it from his point of view, and yes, I see these things, but I don't see these things as my worry. I see these things as his plan and in his control, and it's different. Now, I need that freedom. I need that freedom to ask, which is why most of the time, we're constantly we just need to throw our problems out there, and we need to. I think you need to take your problems to the Lord. But you need to take them to the Lord after you looked at the Lord. Prayer doesn't need to be a 5-minute worry session. Okay? It needs to start with seeing him. And that changes everything. I'll give you another illustration. I'm talking about Jade. When Jade first came to the house, Justin, she wouldn't ask anything. I mean, she was just this awkward little thing. You were so nervous about how... Don't start shaking your head. I know I'm telling the truth. She wouldn't say anything. She wouldn't ask for more to drink. She wouldn't ask for salt. She wouldn't say she doesn't like that. Everything was just like, ooh, these mean old people. I want to know what Eric said about us that she was so nervous, but maybe I don't. Yeah, you should be nervous. But she wouldn't ask anything. I don't even know how long Jade's been around. But now she'll just send me a text, say, will you do this or will you do that or do you mind? Or I just love that. There's a freedom there. She knows if I can, I will. Jade, I don't ever want you to stop that. You don't have to worry about stopping it because I can say no, I'm a big boy. But I always want you to ask. Compared to God's love for us, I love Jade this much. Now, maybe it's a little bit more. I was worried about Eric finding somebody for a while, Maybe a little more. But compared to the immense love of God, Justin, he wants us to ask. There's a freedom that shows up in for us to ask when we focus on his power and on his hand. And it's no longer a shopping list. I'm going to run out of time. There's another freedom that goes in, and I'm just throwing this out there. Let me just do this. Mr. Putin has a problem. Okay, no, seriously. If Mr. Putin would have gone in there fast, all blitzkrieg, okay, this is what happens. People have homes, they have jobs, they have families. Brother Maddox, they might have compromised a little bit to protect those things. Okay, but when the job's already gone and the house is in rubble, and there's an enabling freedom to fight, and that's what he's fighting against. We struggle with compromise because we want to protect all these little things that we have and we own and the way we want it to be and how it should happen. And for Brother Maddox, in prayer there is this freeing thing. When we see his power and his love for us, I don't have to control every little thing. I'm okay with the fact that he's in control because he's all powerful and he's all loving. It's a freeing and enabling fact. Anyway, so first track, Boom. We need to ask what we need. Second track, Psalm 124. We need to learn to affirm what God has done. We're going to have 2 practical pointers, so I need to do this quick. Psalm 124. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, now may Israel say. If just what he just wanted, this psalm tells you to say, if it was not God, then what? If God wasn't on our side, then what would have happened? Think about if it wasn't him. Verse 2, he says it again. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side when men rose up against us, then they had swallowed us up quick. When their wrath was kindled against us, then the waters had overwhelmed us. The stream had gone over our soul. Then the proud waters had gone over our soul. Blessed be the Lord who hath not given us as prey to their teeth. Our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we are escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. Now, there's a drastic difference between these 2 psalms. In Psalm 123, Doug, it's asking, it's petition, it's I need. In Psalm 124, it's you have already done. Psalm 124 is the affirmation of what God has done. Psalm 123 is asking what we need. These 2 tracks are what must be there if the train is going to move forward. 2 practical thoughts just on this psalm. 1, we need to learn to practice the what-ifs of faith, and you can tell I'm moving fast. Any natural man who is not living delusionally tends to worry about the what-ifs of life. Okay, now if you're out there saying, well, I don't care, then you're delusional. And you think you're in way more control than you actually are. I don't care about nothing. Yeah. Everybody says they don't care about something until they're off in the corner crying. But I can lose my job. I could lose my spouse. What if my spouse dies? What if the test is positive? What if my child, whatever, fill in the blank? What if the house gets termites? What if the car blows up? What if? The what ifs of life. Well, he starts this with a what if. But what he has us doing is learning to move from the what ifs of life to the what ifs of faith. Often happens in great trauma. Men, you go through great trauma. Somebody's going through a divorce, or they go through a death, or you see them, or going through cancer. If you're close to them, you will often hear this statement. I just don't know how somebody would go through this if they didn't have God. I don't know how I would have done this if I didn't have God. Okay? What they're doing is in the middle of all of this, quote unquote, Ukrainian destruction, they're like, what if I didn't have God? How do I deal with all of this? Well, Brother Bill, what that makes them focus on is the fact that they do have God. Okay, so they do have God, so they see things like he's all powerful and he's in control and he has a plan for me and he's just good. You see, when we start to affirm him for who he is, it changes our reality. Now it's not the mountain. Now it's he who lives on the mountain. And guess, these things are not overwhelming, but you just don't understand what I'm going through. No, you don't understand how great our God is. Brutes, don't argue for the right to have this view. Just for a little bit, quit being so argumentative. For a little bit, just look up and see if it doesn't make you not want to look back down. For a little bit, live in the glory of heaven. It'll change the daydreams of this. I am his. He is good. Changes everything. This is a pattern through all the New Testament, by the way. Paul would write to the Corinthians. He says, think of where you once were. Ben, think of where you once were. What are you trying to do? Make me feel bad? No, Paul didn't write that to make you feel bad. Paul wrote that to make you realize what God has done. That's what if? Well, he is. So think about all that he's done. He would write to the Ephesians. He would say, you once were dead, but now you're alive. You once were in darkness, but now you're in light. Now you can see. In prayer, affirm what he has already done. It'll change everything. It'll change how we pray. 2, because we've got 3 minutes. We need to learn to major on the perfect tense, which I couldn't say except for thanks to Brother Mike. Now, the perfect tense is things that have already happened. So, like we're talking about salvation here, salvation comes in 3 parts. We have been saved. That's a completed action, perfect tense. We are being saved. It's an ongoing process. We will be saved. It's a future hope. In this picture, he has us focusing on the completed action. Look at verse 7. Wherewith, that's the wrong passage. Our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we are escaped. Now, Brother Bill, you know why he's praying this? Because he's being ridiculed and being torn down, and but you know what he just focused on? God, you've conquered all of this. You see, he's focusing on what has already happened. He's focusing on that completed action, declaring what God has already done. It makes me depend on him. It makes me live in the reality of who he is. Eric, did you get a chance to look up some of those verses? Yes? No? Romans 5? Give me Romans 5. Let me just go through a couple of them real quick. Romans 5:1. Therefore, being justified by faith, already happened. You know what happens? Because I'm already justified by faith, I have peace with God. There you go. Doesn't in the middle of Rome, not a comfortable place to be as a Christian at that point. Justified by faith, I have peace with God. Changes how you view life. Changes how you respond to life. Eric, give me the next one. I write unto you, little children, because your sins are already forgiven. Now you read 1 John, and you know what that does? The fact that your sins are forgiven changes everything. It changes how you deal with other people. It changes your hope. It changes how you love, how you act. It changes everything. Because your sins are forgiven, you're freed. It's everything. Galatians 2, I'm crucified. Peter, on and on and on. The New Testament is full of affirming what he's already done. Verse 8, when we have confidence in what he's already done, it gives us confidence in what he's going to do. Our help in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. See, he goes from what he's already done to, all right, he can handle this. See, I can have confidence in what I'm asking him because I concentrated on what he's already done. Now, here's the twin tracks. They move in the right direction. They help us get closer to God. Ask what we need. Affirm what he's done. Now, if we ask without affirm, Brother Bill, if we ask without affirming, it leads to defeat. You know, it just never happens. It becomes shopping list. There's no affirmation. We just get depressed and we quit. Okay, but if we just, affirm and affirm and affirm and affirm without actually looking at the problems, it becomes, some reality check. I mean, you've been in church long enough. You know those people. Bless God, this, how they did it. No reality. It almost looks cult-like. Well, that's just how Jesus should be. Oh, yeah. Have you ever read about him in the garden? God has not called us to be ignorant. To be a Christian, you just have to put on blinders and not see life. No, you see it, but you see it differently. Asking and affirming leads to deliverance. It leads to growing up that path. And that's what he's called us to. But Doug, you close in a word of prayer this morning.